Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Career Journeys. Today I'm here with Matt. We are going over some awesome stories, and he is our next guest on this lineup. So it's great to have you here.
Great for being here.
Awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about your role and what you do for work?
So Matt Lewandowski, I am a senior manager at T-Mobile in the broadband business intelligence space. A lot of boring words to describe like a pretty cool thing I work on. Essentially, the home internet product. So the singing guys for Scrubs, who are doing our commercials, we support that.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about, what you love about what you get to do. What's some of the day-to-day things that really bring you joy in your role?
Yeah. So for me, the biggest thing that I love doing as part of our role is connecting with people who aren't great at analytics. And I say that because I've always found it fascinating to stay close to the business and how things are going. I realize that data can sometimes be a little bit of an intimidating topic, and certainly I kind of stumbled my way into data, but on a day-to-day basis, we're working with people who actually make decisions on should we increase pricing or should we order more units, and how should we reward in-store associates with doing all sorts of things. So, sometimes we put together charts and graphs and don't always realize that there are implications to those things. And so it's fun being connected to the people that make those decisions.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's definitely like an important piece to sit through all the data and understand what it actually means,
Yeah.
right? So tell me a little bit about like your career journey. You're now kind of climbing those ranks at T-Mobile, but obviously coming here as an alumni. Tell me a little bit about your story from UMKC, getting into the position you're in today.
I always describe myself as the accidental analyst. I never thought or even wanted to get into this space initially. But I graduated in 2011 from the Bloch School. I was a December graduate, so I was a little bit off the schedule there a little. And for me, once I stumbled into my first couple positions, I really wasn't finding the passion that I wanted to do. And so I had always told myself, man, it would be fun to work at an ad agency and, pretend to be like I'm on Mad Men and do all the fun things that they do. So I was just looking for an opening, and I thought I was going to be a graphic designer. I've always been really enamored with visual storytelling. And the only position they had open at the time was in the analytics department. And my former boss, Dawn Kernan, she just kind of rolled the dice on a kid who probably had no business being in that role. But prior to that, I was just kind of hustling and doing whatever I could to make ends meet. But by the time I made my way into the agency, the joke was on me. I completely fell in love. I had always had an aptitude for math. I really enjoyed it. I joked that I was the business major, perhaps the only business major that took Calc 3. So so for me, finding my way into DEG and working there at the agency was such a blast. It opened the doors to travel all over the country and have all sorts of clients. And then from there, I graduated to a different agency where I stepped into a director role. And then H&R Block recruited me to be the director of marketing analytics for a while. And that was a blast, had a ton of fun. And then just kind of made my way over to T-Mobile eventually. And here I am supporting our home internet product.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, it's a really interesting trajectory, and it's an awesome place to be working in, space wise, because, internet access there's kind of the union of like the future of tech and the future of jobs, but also like civic needs, right? Like you all need internet access. And so I know that T-Mobile is advancing some different satellite initiatives and things like that. And so it's really cool to see that, the home internet is a big focus for you guys.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about like the skills and the mindset that go into being great at what you do, right? So,
Yeah.
you said that you had an aptitude for math. I think I got to Calc 2. I like mathematical theory less
Yeah.
than I like the actual technicals. But
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about the skills and the mindset that you feel have had played a big part in helping you be successful at your role.
Sure. I think the popular phrase right now in my field is data scientist. It's been around forever. I actually have found a completely different path. My talents in analytics have less to do with statistical models and more to do with my ability to just connect people to the information. I coach our teams constantly of saying, our role is to make the difficult things seem easier. And so I've always found a passion in developing, visuals, whether it's dashboards or presentations. I'm one of those nerds that loves TED Talks and finding how people communicate different ideas. Ironically, I think one of the most influential speeches that I've watched on a TED Talk was one of the storytellers from Pixar describing how they put together a story from start to finish. And I started adapting that to how I was presenting in a corporate setting, which, maybe not the sexiest version of what they had in mind, but, I think the human elements of data are some of the most underrated. I can't tell you how many resumes I'm now receiving to come work at T-Mobile, where it feels like everybody has PhDs and has done all this incredible work. And I'm not in any way trying to take away from those accomplishments. But one of the things I think people forget about all the time is just how can you convey what you're passionate about in a way that makes someone else care about it?
Yeah.
And so I find myself teaching my teams more how to present to senior leaders and how to apply for applications to go present at conferences. One of the things I was able to do early on in my career, Tableau is a visualization tool that we use to create charts and graphs and dashboards and stuff. Now owned by Salesforce, because Salesforce seems to own everything these days. But I got to speak at the conference in 2018 in New Orleans. And my whole topic was about how I massively failed at building a dashboard for all of our clients, but took that feedback and really learned how to refine what I was doing, because, no one cares about how many hours I poured into these like lines of code or things that I had done on the backside. They just want something that works, and that's so often underrated. You get swept up in the complexity of it, and sometimes you forget to simplify things for people in a way that they can understand it and connect with the information.
Yeah, well, I think you're keying into something that it's kind of, mystical for a lot of kids, and students in school and getting ready for careers, is like how to present themselves.
Yeah.
And how to like really, showcase their skills. And a lot of time it's the soft skills. So like one of our guests we previously spoke to was, talking about how to even communicate your soft skills. And what you're saying that's kind of interesting to me is, because your background in data and having to explain what data means, you have a really good understanding of how to take something that could be either innocuous or misleading and actually translate it. Because what people forget about data is that data is just an extrapolation of human action, right? So it's not computer. It's just we've taken what people actually do in real life and put it on a graph, right? So you can't take the human out of the data.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really interesting. And what I'd love to hear from you is like, what are some of those tips that you can give to students about how to do a better job of extrapolating their experiences, whether it's volunteer work, whether it's building a side business, whether it's working, on a side project? How do they do a better job at communicating that when they're looking for work so they can show that they may be different from other candidates?
Yeah, I think, so first off, the assumption is the material, right? By the time you make your way into an interview setting and you're sitting across from the person, or I guess staring at the screen, depending on the environment, we assume that you know how to do what you say you do. I think the real challenge and what starts to set candidates apart from others is their ability to continuously be uncomfortable and do things that they don't necessarily want to do initially. So whether that's taking on a project that you don't know how to complete, whether that's volunteering at an organization where you may not have the background or skills, but can develop those on the way. I mean, nobody knows how to do something until they do it, and I think that's something that students sometimes forget. They spend all this time connecting to spreadsheets and databases and things like that. But to your earlier point, there's a responsibility of using data and using it in a way that makes a positive impact. I can think of a dozen other opportunities where we've looked at, how a certain ad campaign or even in the world of taxes, trying to make sure that you're providing the right um, products and services that don't have negative impacts on people. Like, no one wants to do their taxes, right? But finding ways to make that less painful and easier for folks who maybe don't have as much income or are relying on that refund coming back. And the same's true for home internet.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that we operate, it's essentially with a super cell phone, that you can plug into a wall and have internet pretty much anywhere. And you don't always think about that when you're in a setting like Overland Park, Kansas, where the headquarters is, where everything's well air conditioned and, you always have all the electricity and Wi-Fi you need. But we're providing services that have real impacts to people who are in remote areas, and one of the cool stories, just relating back to some of the responsibilities of data and trying to get people to step outside their comfort zone. There are a couple of instances. So recently, T-Mobile allows you to now connect to the Starlink satellites up there. We ran a beta test, and I remember sitting there while they were going over. This is all kind of out there in the public, but we were sitting there, and the number one thing I took away from that was we actually saved lives. Like, someone was stuck in distress, off drifting into the ocean, and they were able to connect to the satellite and get 911 out there to help them. So you don't always think about that. And I think, if I ever thought when I was in the classrooms here at UMKC that I would be helping support a team that's making those types of impacts, I just don't think it ever registered for me when I was a student. And so now I find myself always trying to try new things and make myself uncomfortable, and going back to those themes of also making sure that it's relatable. Like, you want to do things that challenge yourself continuously.
Yeah.
Because the moment you become happy with where you are, you start to become complacent. And I think that's something that, whether it's a startup company or a large scale enterprise, no one wants complacent workers. And so we know the material. I want to see things that tell me that you like learning forever and always. That I want to continue to challenge yourself and learn new things. So.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good call out, because a lot of times, when we hear people talk about the job search now, they're feeling frustrated with the requirements of the job that they're trying to get that they can't have because they're already in college. And the juxtaposition I always provide is like, yeah, you may not have, agency experience out of college, but like, you can do passion projects. You can do things that you just enjoy. Like, those are still somewhat relatable, right? And I think like showing that initiative in your resume is really important, because like, you're coming out of college, like, you're not going to have maybe more than one internship, if that. And so like, you just have to get creative, and it's not about doing it because you have to and because this is what it's the world is like now. It's like, no, you should do things you enjoy and like and try, and like, that will help inform you of where you want to go, because to your point, you don't know where we're going to end up, right? Like, you have no idea. You just have to follow the stuff that you are excited about.
Yeah, and I remember, I know Professor Goncher still works here. I was in his market research class when there was an optional opportunity that arose where Romanelli Optics was looking to open up a new store down in Hollywood, Florida. Whether or not that was related to retirement, I have no idea. But I remember it was me and maybe two or three other students that raised our hand and said, yeah, we'll take that on. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I've got Professor Goncher here to kind of like put up the guardrails and keep us, pointed in the right direction. But even something that seems really small like that, can really kind of kickstart your mindset that way. And, when I was applying at an agency, I had no agency experience, but what I did have was that project that Professor Goncher set me up with. I did, I was a little in sync. I was in a wool suit because that was the only thing I owned at the time. It was August in Kansas City. And I remember just going around to some of the small businesses in my neighborhood saying, can I run your Google Analytics for free? I just need the experience. And lo and behold, I got, free is a pretty affordable price for most small businesses. And so I got 2 or 3 clients out of that. They ended up actually paying me just because they felt, obligated to give something. But those two things really stood out on my resume when it came time to apply, because everyone else was just, yeah, I graduated from so and so college and I've got the same skill set that everybody else is putting on their resume. What I had was stories
Yeah.
to bring to the interview and say, hey, I didn't do it right, but I learned a ton. And here's what I'm going to do with that knowledge for you,
Yeah.
So just put yourself out there, make
Yeah.
yourself uncomfortable.
Well, and I like that because it's kind of like it's similar but different from my experience, which I think is helpful for to share just for folks to know about all the different paths that happen. Like I went out, I was a marketing entrepreneurship major in 18, and I went out and tried. I went and interviewed at all of the firms, and we have a somewhat of a marketing hub in the city.
Yeah.
If you didn't know. But like there's a lot of incredible agencies out there. So I went and interviewed for them. And what happened for me was I had been running a couple different branded operations and doing some different things in the pop culture kind of music space. And I was overqualified for the entry level roles. And so I couldn't even land a job because I was just slightly overqualified for those junior roles. And so I ended up just starting my own agency. And that's what I've been doing for the last almost 10 years now. Yeah. So it's I'm glad that we have the juxtaposition because it's good to know all the different ways that you can, work your way into a space that you enjoy, right? Like I had no experience with a camera, no experience with Adobe, no experience doing any brand work at all. And I was like, let's start an agency. And we're still doing it here 8 to 10 years later, right? And it's amazing what YouTube University and some grit can provide, and that's right. Some UMKC mentorship. So, well, I think this is really helpful, and I think one of the things that I'd love to hear from you is like, what makes someone, if a student is sitting here watching this, what makes them maybe more apt to be successful in your industry in the analytics side? Like, what are some of the characteristics or qualities that maybe make them, more apt to do that?
Yeah, I'll kind of put my own lens on it because, full disclosure, even though I'm on the analytics advisory board here, which I love, I tend to skew more towards the visual and artistic side of data. So my own claim to fame is more on the storytelling side than the modeling side. I can dabble, I can work my way through it, but certainly my talents align that way. So for me, you know, making sure that you know the ins and outs of a particular software. So for us, it's Tableau, but there's all sorts of hard skills that we're looking for. I mentioned earlier, we just assume you know how to do the job. So for something that students can connect to, there's so many other things outside the classroom that UMKC offers to jump in and participate in. And so if they're looking to be successful in our space, you have to be able to kind of brand yourself. You have to be able to make yourself important to that person. Make them feel like, oh man, if I don't hire this person, I'm going to be missing out because they've got so much personality. They've got, so much charisma in the interview. So, we look for people who can communicate things in a clear, concise way. Whether it's designing dashboards for your phone, think of the practical application of it. I make fun of it all the time of saying like the least used but most important dashboards are the ones that our execs can pull up on their phone when they're walking from one conference room to another, and they just want to know, am I doing well or am I doing poorly? Right. So be creative, find a need, ask for feedback. That's another thing. Like people are so shy about feedback, and unless a student seeks that out, if you're the person receiving the work, it feels like a criticism, to just volunteer and say, hey, you didn't really hit the mark on this. But beyond the classroom, just be yourself, try to connect with other people in ways that they want to connect in. And sometimes that's a guessing game. Sometimes that's being vulnerable. I mean, there's a guy that I really like named Simon Sinek, who just says, my superpower is not being afraid to be the dumbest person in the room, because he sits in these board meetings and they're reading memos and things and everybody's nodding their head. And all of a sudden he'll raise his hand and be like, I'm sorry, what does this mean? Why are we talking about this? And then all of a sudden it's like a pressure valve is released out of the room and people can start being human again. It's so rare these days to find students who have a passion and students who don't lean into AI to do everything for them. Like certainly that's a component of it, but the human element is sometimes forgotten in the workplace. And, I'm starting to see trends of companies inviting employees back onto campus or back in the building. And, um, you know, the last couple of years in COVID really probably like shook up the business world a ton, but, just be human, be a person that people want to talk to in the hallway. Like sometimes that just takes throwing yourself out there and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely really important, especially when you're just trying to, I think beyond just trying to get a job, right? Because a lot of times it can feel like, oh, I'm having to maybe code switch or change who I am, and that's really not the point. The more of the point is like be yourself, be unique in a world where like everyone's trying to be the same.
Yeah.
Not because you need to for a job, but because like it's what will make you happier and it's what will pull you towards the people that you're supposed to be around, right? Like if you pretend to be who you're not, you're going to get jobs, you're going to get friends, you're going to get into opportunities that don't serve you because they are mirrored after a personality that is not you.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, one of the big things that we've been asking people that I'd love to hear from you is what some like one of the key lessons that you've learned over your time, aside from what you've already shared with us, like, is there a big key lesson that's like really stuck with you, that you try and embody?
Uh, the thing that sticks out to me the most is fail fast and fail small. Like you just keep building on that. I mentioned earlier in the conference that I spoke at, it was basically a documentation around how poorly I did at a job. And the story there was I had built this product that was intended to scale at a huge rate, potentially every client we had at our agency at the time. And I was really proud of it. I sent out a survey to sort of quantify how great everybody thought I was in the moment. And I ended up getting like a 60% back in terms of satisfaction, which by any standard is not an A grade, right? So what I learned from that experience, we completely broke down everything, every bit of feedback someone gave us. Like I could have walked away really mad and just quit, but I wanted to really fix it. And I wanted to lean in and try to make it better. So we stripped everything down, built it back up, re-released it out to all of our clients. And then all of a sudden, then the real raving review started coming in. And it was all because I had built something for an analyst and I didn't build something for our client. So I built a very technically sound, impressive dashboard, but no one gave a rat's ass about it, right? Like they just wanted something that worked, something that was simple and easy to take in. So, the lesson that I carry with me to this day is like, don't be afraid of failing as long as you're going to learn from it. And I know that's probably cliche, but there's a reason lots of people say it. Yeah. Right. Like, failure is a much better teacher than success sometimes. And that's what I've had to learn maybe the hard way throughout my career.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really great note to end on. I think it's something that, we talk about a lot in the Bloch School, especially, for entrepreneurs or people trying to take a long range career in business is, you say fail fast and small, like mine is fail forward, right? I think there's like different ways to say it, but I think the big thing is like you'll never be perfect, and if you try, like you won't end up hitting what you think you're going to hit. You're going to end up straying away further.
Yeah.
And failing fast is actually like the best thing you can do in school because you have guidelines, you have guardrails. In real life, you don't have those. And so the faster you fail in college, the quicker you can get to successful solutions. You know what I mean? So, well, thank you so much for taking the time today to chat with us and share your story. And it was great learning more about what you're working on and all the implications on the data side. So,
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. Yes, this was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much.